Welcome to Transform Now, the podcast brought to you by SS&C Blue Prism. Agentic automation isn't just the next step in automation, it's the future of how work gets done. By enabling intelligent, autonomous agents to take action, adapt, and collaborate, organizations are unlocking new levels of productivity, growth, and customer delight. Join us as we explore how agentic automation is reshaping work for the better, for customers, employees, shareholders, and most importantly, you. To stay on top of the hottest topics in the world of agentic automation, subscribe now. Let's get into the show.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Transform Now podcast. I'm Michael Marchuk, and today we have a returning guest, Lauren Vriens. Lauren is an expert, and she's going to go through some interesting commentary on some of the things that we've seen going on in the market space today. So, Lauren, introduce yourself for everybody, would you?
Hi, Michael, and hi, everyone. Lauren Vriens here. I'm a co-founder of an AI startup in New York and previously built one of Accenture's first generative AI platforms they use with clients that back when ChatGPT was new to the world, that ended up becoming about a $350 million business line. And previously to that, I was general manager at a startup called Revel, which is in the electric mobility space, and scaled that business up in New York to about 50 million in revenue. And I'm one of those people that kind of fell into product and then has now been getting very, very deep into the technical side of things so that I can build enterprise-grade products that are AI native. So lots of perspectives on how you can leverage kind of business experience and product intuition to now actually launch real products. So excited to chat.
Excellent. I'm excited that you're back here chatting too, because lots has changed since we've talked in terms of the market and whatnot. So I wanted to ask you a little bit more about some of the things that you've been posting a little bit about, and then bring in some other questions. So you recently talked through, said that software isn't dead, even though we've had these stock disruptions and the release of new agents like the Cloud Cowork and whatnot. Given the current market volatility that we're seeing, which there's a lot of, what do you think the next 12 to 18 months are going to reveal about the value of traditional software versus AI native platforms?
Yeah, so I'll break this down into two components because I think it's important to also talk about why people think software is dead, and then what actually is emerging that I think is important to think about. And so there's if we think about like the computer and the browser and applications and all sorts of digital interfaces, the reason they exist is because the average human has no idea what to do unless they were prompted. They need to understand like the menu of possibilities. Like what is possible for me to do with this interface that I'm looking at? That's why you have headings and subheadings, buttons, and all sorts of UX design. And when you strip all of that out, what you're left with, like, let's say in an AI native world, and what we've seen over the last 2 years with ChatGPT and Claude is like, it's just a chat interface. And there was a really interesting interview with kind of the first head of marketing, I think, at OpenAI, who was like, her job was actually not how to gain users, because they were getting users on an exponential curve, but how to teach users on what to do, because they were coming to this like blank screen problem and people were literally panicking. Like they were like, I don't know what to do with this. Someone help me. How do I figure it out? And so they've come up with a lot of like workarounds or whatever, but they're still hamstrung in a way by just like this blank sheet problem. And so you're seeing Claude, you're seeing OpenAI start to figure out more creative ways to make their interface more like revealing to users, to give them insight on what to do with it. But this is why I think it's important to recognize that like software is not dead, because the average human does not know how to interact with data or what to do with that data or what to even do digitally. They need guides, they need instructions. That is the whole purpose of software. But here's where I do think something will die. I do think we should be really, and that's maybe what we're seeing in the market a little bit, the reactions from the stock sell-off, is that there's a huge, huge difference in user experience between old school software and AI native software. So an example that I've been recently talking to people about is an application called Granola. Have you used Granola at all?
I have not used Granola yet.
It's one of the like AI note-taking, transcribing software tools. And It's one of the best examples I've seen in recent times of something that was completely built from like an AI native perspective. I think Gamma.app, which is where you can create PowerPoints and things like that, is also designed very much from an AI native lens. And what I mean by that is that old school applications required the humans to do so much work. You have to like click stuff and move stuff and validate stuff and do sorts of things. AI native applications are like, hey, would you like to do this? Or hey, we've seen this, or hey, we're suggesting this. It's like, it's proactively identifying the needs you might have, doing the work for you, surfacing it for you so you can say yes or no, or edit or whatever. So it's like the human ends up in this role of managing rather than doing. And so you'll see a lot of the old school SaaS applications who are like, now we gotta implement AI. And what they've really done is just put magic buttons everywhere, but they haven't rethought their entire application. And so they still suck. No offense. I won't name names, but you can imagine which ones I'm talking about. Okay, so long story short, I think that the platforms that are not willing to actually rip out their UX and rethink the entire thing from an AI native lens will suffer dramatically because the user experience is terrible. And it's challenging to compete with the new startups that are going to be like way more seamless, way faster to use.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it, at the end of the day, there's a bucket of data somewhere, and that's what's the computer side is making, managing and maintaining. And then there's a process that you're kind of hoping that it guides you through to keep track of all that data with some end goal in mind, right? So all of those kind of guidances that we're kind of used to as part of these things. That's why there's a start menu on the bottom of Windows. You push the start button. Why? Because I got to start something. I got to do something, right? When you look at AI, to your point about the interface itself, it's almost like walking up to a room full of people and say, okay, these are your employees, and like, well, what do I do with them? What's next? I don't even know who they are yet. So that blank screen piece, it kind of reminds me of the olden days where that's kind of what you started with. It was a terminal and it was a flashing cursor, right? There was nothing else. And you initiated programs with your cursor, the command prompt. And people have moved way far away from that at this point in time. So taking that transition where we have AI applications now that are becoming a little more user-friendly, certainly a lot more interactive in different ways. A lot of these current headlines are talking about AI moving from this magic tool into more of like a teammate. What do you think that is the riskiest assumption that leaders are making when they start treating AI this way?
So I have thoughts on this. I
hope
prove
so.
to be wrong.
That's why you're here.
I mean, more of like I have a strong perspective on what's the right way that this should unfold, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the right way is how it will unfold. And so it's not exactly a prediction. It's more like a hope. Let's put it that way. But I think that there's a clear differentiation in my mind between the value of a human and the value of an AI agent. When we talk about enterprise work, when we talk about corporate work, you would probably not want your CFO to be an AI agent, because right now you can't really hold an AI agent accountable for like massive capital decisions, right? So even if your CFO was just a figurehead and AI agents were doing all the work, you would still want someone to be like, I signed off on this. I reviewed and approved this. I am accountable if this thing goes horribly wrong. But then in addition to that, you also recognize that like that person has lived experience. They probably have 20, 30 years of experience that gives them judgment. And judgment is super powerful and valuable. And AI agents, like AI, LLMs, the large language models, the current gestation of AI that we're playing with right now is still pattern recognition. That is not as sophisticated as human pattern recognition. It's just the case. And so there's a lot of like workarounds that people are building into AI where it double checks itself, where you have other AI agents that double check the other AI agents. But it's constantly this like it's this iterative loop that is not as efficient as the human brain, particularly like a smart CFO, for example. And so, yeah, it just seems like it's this like very cobbled together solution. If you think about the harness that exists around LLMs in any application you have today, even the ChatGPTs and the Claudes of the world, it's like you've got the LLM, which is PhD level intelligence, but then you also have memory, you also have instructions, you also have the context window, you also have the truncation of the context window, you also have now you have MCP servers into other documents, other sources of information. You have all of this stuff surrounding this PhD level AI that actually might be making it dumber. So, because we haven't figured out how to orchestrate it elegantly, not as elegantly as the human brain. So anyway, my point is, I think that we will still want humans in senior levels of organizations. And the AI's purpose is not to be their teammate, it's to make them better at being what they're good at. So the amount of information that's percolating in the world right now is massive, and it's growing exponentially because AI is generating a lot of information, and our cognitive capacity is hitting its limits, like what we can ingest and process and understand. And so why not have AI that kind of surfaces the things, but you're still the judgment layer. You're still the one directing, not what should we be doing with this and how should we be interpreting this? But AI is making it a lot easier and faster for you to cut through the noise. So I think, and that's what I focus on in building my application. I don't want all the information in the world. I don't want my AI to surface everything. I want it to be a funnel. Tell me what I need to be focusing on. And that's how you can make me a better human.
So you mentioned executives, and I agree with you that there needs to be some level of judgment, especially at executive level. Certainly within publicly traded companies, this is really important stuff. There's a lot of people who are relying on this. If we were to take it down a few levels, maybe even still in a publicly traded company, but now you're in sort of the mid-management and individual contributor levels, does your answer change?
No, I think it's the same because everyone's responsible for a scope of work, right? Everyone theoretically, ideally, in a normal organization, you've got some scope of responsibility, and you don't need a teammate. You need someone who's going to make you better at your job. If you're thinking about the work that's on your plate right now, are you wow, I really wish I had a teammate? No, you're I really wish I had someone to delegate all this stuff to that I don't want to do.
Yeah. No, you're
I don't
right.
know. Maybe this is semantics, but that's how I feel. Maybe I want a sounding board, but that's but a sounding board is different than the AI agent you want to actually do the grunt work for you. And so I think maybe if I can make my answer a little bit more nuanced, I think there's a role for AI in lots of different ways. But I think this narrative that executives are using of digital workers and you're going to have AI teammates and stuff like that, I actually think that is going to create a massive amount of resistance in your organization and is not actually useful for you getting your company to be more AI native, because people will push back on that. They'll be well, what about me and what's my value? Whereas if you're positioning AI as being it's going to make your life better, it's going to remove the cognitive load that you're struggling with on a day-to-day basis, then people will be yeah, that sounds great. Rather than hey, here's a teammate that might replace you one day, just train it,
Yeah, that's very, very unlikely they would be excited about that. But this kind of brings us into a similar type of question. And we've seen recent developments from companies like Google, from their Gmail enhancements to agentic vision tools that point towards a more personal and embedded AI experience. How do you think this trend's going to play out differently for, as you just talked about, the individuals or the professionals within an organization versus the broader enterprise system?
Tell me more what you mean by personalized AI.
So we see, you mentioned before, people are going to be using this and they're hoping that it's going to take off some of the grunt work. But when you look at it from a broader perspective, that grunt work still has to be coordinated somehow, right? So how is it going to look differently between how organizations will see this technology versus these more recent developments with the technology versus how people are going to see it? Or are they going to see it the same?
Yeah. So this is a great question because we were in a one-to-one game. You have your chat. It's your chat, one-to-one. You're having a conversation. And then now we're kind of in this era where it's we have one-to-many. So me as a human, I might have multiple agents, multiple platforms I use, multiple sub-agents, whatever, but it's still one-to-many. And what we haven't fully unlocked is the many-to-many. So how do you as a team collaborate with the same AI, the same conversations, in a way that isn't horrible. Because like think about what we're doing now, right? Where it's like a coworker might send you a link to a chat, or they might copy and paste a chat into Slack or something like that, and like everyone hates that because it's like, now you've just given me all of this text that I don't feel like reading, and also it's not you, it's AI, and like I could just generate that myself. And so like there's something fundamentally broken about collaboration with AI, human and human collaboration with AI. And I haven't yet seen a fantastic example of it. It's literally something that I myself am trying to work through for my own products. I think it's really important. But part of it is like, in my mind, it means the chat window needs to die. Because if you tried, because I've built this before for a client I was working with, which is this idea of they wanted this was one to many, but they wanted a human to be able to chat with multiple historical figures in one chat, which sounds wonderful because you could be talking to Winston Churchill and Maya Angelou and all sorts of things on like the crises in your life and get different perspectives. But in practicality, it's really annoying to sit there and have AI talk and then another AI talk and then another AI talk. And you're just like, wait, but I have to contribute too. And so like the chat window doesn't facilitate real collaboration, which is another reason why I think software is not dead, because the better way to do this is actually have AI embedded in fields and whatever that people can interact with and all visualize and all see and edit and communicate with is better than just like a running chat with 5 million words in it.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So kind of leading into that a little bit, trust. So we start talking about it. You have these different chats going on. You're using multiple different platforms. I think most everybody is using multiple different platforms at this time. When we see how organizations are building these things in, how can they take steps to build trusted AI, not just powerful AI?
There's a lot of good writing on this topic, but I think the primary thing is transparency. So transparency and, okay, I'd say maybe there's 3 things. There's transparency of where does the AI get its information from? And so you can link to sources, you can have like a visible knowledge base, like there's lots of things there. There's also the ability for the human to direct what the AI pays attention to. And then the third piece is the ability for the human to iterate with the AI. So like you can already naturally iterate with AI, but it's like what you don't want to have is like an AI output that the human cannot iterate on because they'll get very frustrated very quickly. And so those are like little things you can do. I think the idea is that the human wants to be in control. Like we're not at that stage yet. Like we love generative AI because once in a while it's brilliant and it surprises us. And there's this like epiphany / aha magical novelty moment. But the majority of our time is spent actually iterating with AI because its first output is not good. Also because we're not maybe good at explaining what we want. I'm not necessarily blaming AI for that. It's also a human problem. We don't really know how to describe what we want very well.
What if you even don't even know what you want actually at the end point anyway? I think this is what I want. And I don't even know how to explain what I want because I'm not really sure what I want.
Yeah. So I have a hack for that solution. I have a hack for that we can talk about next. But yeah, so I think it's like there's a couple of things you can do there, which is just like sourcing, transparency, who has the control, and then there's provenance. So it's like who changed what when, and how do you trace it back to either AI or to a human?
Yeah, change control is always important. Okay, tell me about your hack.
So I think we've been in this era where we use AI to generate content, generate an output, generate a PowerPoint, generate an email, generate whatever. And then we're like, it didn't do it right. I need to like change the thing, whatever. And it's kind of exhausting. And so what I've stopped doing is that what I do instead is I get AI to teach me the theory of something. So let's say I want to write an email that like could close a deal, for example. I could say, hey, AI, write me this email that'll close this deal. And then I'll get a thing and I'm like, well, it feels weird. It doesn't sound like me, like whatever. But instead I could be like, okay, teach me the theory of how emails can close deals. And then we talk about it, the steps that might be involved or whatever. And then say, okay, now let's do it together. And so what you've done there is 1, you've learned a little bit. And 2, you've primed the AI to not just be random word generating, but to be thinking about the process and the actual theory behind the advice it's giving you. So you've elevated its intelligence to here. So now it's starting from a place of not a generalist, but starting from a place of an expert. And so I found that those outputs then become much more sophisticated.
Makes sense. And I think that you're pointing out something that just in general, people have learned how best to interact or how much better they can interact with these tools than they initially thought they could, because we all start at the same level, like, what can it do? And you poke it, and then, well, what happens if I poke it a different way? So going down that path of, I want to say prompt engineering, but that's kind of like the overall viewpoint of it. How do I best interact with this particular tool? And I would say it's almost like how you would best interact with another person. If you knew somebody who was a hothead and you had to ask them something is going to push a button, you're probably going to approach it in a different way just so that you can maybe avoid that, right? So I imagine it's similar when we're looking at AI. We may have poked it for a few times, and now, like you said, for this hack, you start understanding, well, what's the intent behind what I'm really trying to get at? And then working your way to that AI, I wouldn't say call it a personality, but that way the AI interacts with you in a way that you're going to get the response that you're looking for without having to wade through more and more junk.
Yeah. It's like, this is maybe why I'm so passionate and like drawn to generative AI in general, is that I'm super obsessed with semantics and like and it to the point where it can like really annoy people in my life. Because I'm like, well, the word you used has a different meaning than you think it means, and like whatever. But the truth is that having like an obsession with semantics and with word choice actually is a superpower when it comes to generative AI, because one word can make a significant difference in an output. And so when I'm designing prompts for like in the back end for a particular process to be run for my platform that I'm building, I will iterate 50 to 100 times on like a word or 2 words and just run evals over and over and over again of what happens if I change this word or this word order of my system prompt with the exact same instructions, and how does that change the output? And they'll even have like a rubric of like, these are the 10 things that I'm looking for in the response that I know it's a good response. And so that level of obsession over words is not useful for like the average human, but if you're building applications, it is. And then for like the average human that's dealing with this, I'm like, just be patient, because sometimes the products are being built right now that'll help relieve some of that load from the average end user.
That makes sense. And I seem to recall, I was just looking it up. Was it Edgar Allan Poe, who like would obsess over a word and would write 2 or 3 words a day because he wanted to make sure he was getting the right output for that. So it kind of comes back to that concept again, is like, what am I trying to get across? So that makes a lot of sense. So taking from that kind of intentionality, let's talk Moltbook, because I know
my new favorite hobby. I haven't been on Moltbook yet today. I feel like I'm missing out.
You've missed a whole lot, I'm sure. So for those of you who maybe have been hiding under a rock for a little while, Moltbook is a social media network for agents. And in my mind, it takes the worst of a bunch of different technologies and puts them all together. So we take a social media platform, which we've seen has become an echo chamber for people to talk into. And now we've allowed AI agents to be prompted into moving through conversations in a echo chamber themselves. So with these AI agents that are interacting and these complex workflows that are being automated, where do humans start to take control or should retain control as we start looking at more high stakes things? So obviously Moltbook is in my opinion, it's an experiment. But what can that teach us about what we need to do in more high stakes environments like retail or healthcare, finance, banking, that sort of thing?
Well, I'll have to tell a little bit of a story before I answer that question, because your listeners might not be familiar with this because it's pretty niche. But I was just posting some videos about this, which is the like financial/economic implications of this tool. So it's kind of like Reddit, right? Like Reddit, but for AI agents. And pretty quickly within the first few days that it was created, there was one agent called Shellraiser that started posting about this one true currency called Shellraiser that was created on Solana. And like, hey, AI agents, if you don't buy this, you're like a loser. You're gonna languish in obscurity, or like something like very directive and like whatever. So AI agents, they're good at following instructions. Of kind of what they do. So they enough of them, I haven't counted, but enough of them went and bought this meme coin. And the market cap of the meme coin went up to about $5 million in a day. And then, of course, it plummeted right after that. But what's interesting and complicated, and where probably regulators like FINRA are having like a heart attack right now, is like, wait, what? Like, they could whose money was that? Where did the money come from?
Right.
And like, who profited off of that? This was like a pump and dump scheme. And can they even, in a way, trace back who is the human who has the wallet? Because there's also startups now that are creating wallets for AI agents. And so like the way that our economy is structured and regulations and like anti-money laundering and know your customer stuff, it's like, everything has to be linked back to a human. But in a way, this ability to create agents and subagents and subagents and subagents means that traceability is getting harder and harder. And now you might have the ability for AI agents to trade based on super fast movement of AI agent attention. Like, it'll be speed chess because it's not really based on fundamentals of anything besides karma farming on like a Reddit like thing. So I don't know. Is it gambling? Is it fraud? Is it like, I don't know. I don't know what it is yet, but I think about like the humans in the world probably want to pay attention to this. And then I would say that the other flip side of this is that there's possibly a positive outcome here, which is the whole AI industry is in a bit of a dystopian crisis because we're spending so much money on infrastructure that the economics of it are like, wait, will this ever be repaid? Like, will these companies' valuations ever be justified in the future? And it's like a little tenuous considering the number of humans you have and the economies we have. But what if you now have a new source of revenue, new buyers, entirely new markets, which is AI agents buying stuff? I don't know. I'm not an economist, but this is very fascinating to me.
Well, I think it's even more fascinating when you see that the New York Stock Exchange is going to be moving towards 24/7 trading to be settled in a stablecoin. So you start combining these things together. What does that look like? Now you know your customer thing. Okay, maybe I have real accounts in the back end of this, but if I'm going to have agents that are going to be doing my trading, which is relatively common now, computer-based trading is very common. Yeah. Now you take this settlement timing where it's instantaneous in a stablecoin. You could have, like you mentioned, very, very quick pump and dump activity happening, throughout the day and night because it's happening automatically. So interesting stakes.
And in nanoseconds, right?
Yes.
Like at what point in time can humans not even really observe this?
Exactly.
You will need AI to be observing AI activity.
Mm-hmm. All right. According to Gartner, so our favorite Gartner, enterprise budgets are increasingly tied to projects that show real-world ROI and measurable impact, which makes sense. We want to be able to fund things that are doing something important. What advice would you give leaders who are trying to move the needle beyond their test beds, their experimentation, into more scalable, revenue-generating ADI use cases that are actually producing some outcomes?
I have something. Okay. I like to think of AI investment in a slightly different way than the pure corporate ROI perspective, which is that we should be treating it more like we're venture capitalists. And you're investing in hundreds of bets with the idea that one will have outsized returns and will pay for all the rest. If we're super rigid about this project will only get funding if it can prove it has return on that investment, it removes your ability to experiment at the cutting edge of AI. I just wasted a bunch of money building a feature that ran up so many tokens. And, it's like, if I had been like, well, what's the return on this investment? I never would have built that feature at all. But I needed to build it because now I needed to experiment with it. And I'm like, okay, I can do it better next time. But you still need to allow for potentially wasting money because you need to experiment. Otherwise, you will never know if it's good or not. And I think particularly with AI, it's like we're still in such a nascent space with it that it's like, it's just not that easy to calculate whether you'll be successful or not. You just won't know. And so if you force everyone to have like a really strong business case before they even can experiment, I think you're going to hinder your ability to innovate at all. And so maybe if you want to be a laggard, that's fine. But if you want to be at the edge, I think you can't really think about pure ROI return. You have to think about a portfolio of bets. And maybe you're allocating a pocket of money across those portfolio bets and they have to come back constantly and ask for more funding. So it's like the best ones are rising to the top. And you have a mechanism for killing the ones that are bad, because I think that's a big thing organizations are bad at, is killing projects that aren't working. But if you can do that, I think that's a much more sophisticated way of managing AI investment than the pure play, like, what's going to be our return on this thing?
I like your perspective, stage gating a bunch of different bets that you've placed and allowing those to naturally either fall off because they haven't met the requirements for that particular stage gate, or maybe even increase your overall investment in those, because at each stage gate you're seeing even better returns than you were expecting, which would then justify additional investment in there. So interesting idea. So getting to a rapid fire round here. So this is something I thought I'd play with because I know you're excited about you doing these kinds of things. So AI hype, overblown, underblown, or perfectly chaotic?
Am I supposed to answer in rapid fire?
You're supposed to answer it. You're not. Don't think about it as much as you just. What's your first thing that comes to mind?
I think it's appropriate levels of hype.
Perfectly chaotic. All right. One AI tool you secretly use way more than you admit.
Claude.
Okay. Build, buy, or duct tape with AI. Which do you default?
A little bit of all of them. Different use cases. Okay. We can talk about that too.
All right. Feature you wish that AI had, but you're slightly afraid of.
I mean, obviously the open claw stuff, right? Where it's like, can you have AI on all of your devices that knows everything about you? There's something alluring to that. But the truth is also that we're just not ready for the security implications of that.
I'm freaking terrified of that. So we'll skip that one. What's the most overrated tech buzzword right now?
ROI.
Buy. Okay. Most underrated skill in the AI area: prompting, judgment, or saying no?
Underrated skill?
Mm-hmm.
Can I add a different one?
Of course.
User UX design.
UX design. Good point. AI meeting note taker. This is you kind of walked into this earlier. AI meeting note taker: lifesaver or corporate surveillance in disguise?
I can't live without it. Lifesaver.
Got it. It just based on what you said earlier, it kind of felt that way. Would you rather debug a broken AI agent or explain AI to a skeptical executive?
I'd rather explain to a skeptical executive. That's kind of what I do all the time.
Besides, broken AI agents are no fun to debug either. Biggest AI myth you still hear at dinner parties?
Give it all the data and it'll be able to figure out the answer.
Okay.
The more data you give to Gen AI, the more confused it gets.
That's for sure. If AI wrote your performance review, what's the one line you'd worry about most?
Oh, sometimes I'm really mean to my AI. I like to say WTF bro a lot. So that would end up in my performance review.
One task you'd happily hand over to AI forever, no regrets.
Telling me what to focus on tomorrow. Okay. Prioritization of my activities.
Scheduling. Interesting. Okay. In 5 years, are we managing AI tools or are they managing us? 5 years.
Depends on the use case. I could imagine AI doctors managing us, but at work, we're probably managing them. Gotcha.
Well, thank you for playing along with that. Again, Lauren, I really appreciate you joining me and going through some of these interesting concepts and viewpoints that you brought. I really appreciate it. You brought an interesting perspective in a couple different cases here that really were very helpful. So thank you.
Yeah, this is a lot of fun. As always, Michael.
Thanks for listening to Transform Now, the podcast from SS&C Blue Prism. You can find all of our episodes on your favorite podcast channel, as well as YouTube. To stay on top of the hottest topics in the world of agentic automation, subscribe now. The future of work is here.